Now let's discuss ion pumps and ion transporters. In the last lecture, we talked about how to find out the ion flux, the direction of ion flux and across ion channels. And those are determined by the electrochemical potential. And we have a formula to calculate the electrochemical potential and also the non-state potential, which balances the electrochemical potential. So those are the passive channels that ions move passively down the electrochemical potential gradient. Now let's talk about other types of membrane proteins that either actively transport or semi-actively transport. So first, let's discuss ion pumps. It's the active mechanism of ion transport across the membrane. So we call active transporter because they require energy. It's energy supply from ATP. Famous and the most critical and well-known ion pump is also extremely important in physiology is the sodium potassium exchanger. So one is called sodium potassium exchanger. We also call it NKE. So nothing. You may see people call it differently, NKA or other NK kinases or other things. Depending on the context, they will usually would explain what their acronym is. And here I'm going to using NKE just to, this is also a very common way of saying this. So NK is a membrane protein. This is NK. What it does is it actively pumps 3 sodiums out of the cell. So it pumps, let's see. Let me just draw one line. 3 sodium ions. And then pumps in 2 potassium ions. This is one action. So every time the NKE operates, it will do these type of things. And we know that sodium is usually like, roughly say on the order of 140 millimolar outside of the cell. So this is extracellular. And this is intracellular. So usually sodium has high concentration outside of the cell, but inside of the cell, it's usually low concentration, 5 millimolar of sodium. So you know that based on the concentration and also based on the electrical charge, sodium would naturally like to flow into the cell. So that's what a passive sodium channels is doing, it takes in sodium into the cell. So the pump is doing the opposite. It uses energy to actually pump 3 sodium ions out of the cell. And for potassium, it's usually 4 millimolars outside of the cell. And the inside of the cell, it's 140 millimolar. These numbers can change. I'm just saying the order of magnitude roughly. So we know that the potassium, we calculated the last lecture for a typical cell which has like minus 16 millivolts of electrical potential. So the potassium would actually like to move out of the cell. So it also requires energy to take to take potassium into the cell. So this entire process requires energy. And this is the NK is so important for our body is because it maintains the homeostasis of the electrolytes. Without those like active pumps, sodium is harder to be removed out of the cell, and then you will start to accumulate sodium inside the cell, which isn't such a nice thing to have. So the existence of the sodium potassium pump helps to maintain the low concentration of sodium in the body. So these are ion pumps. See, what are exchangers? Or ion transporters? Ion transporters, they are usually for the secondary active transport. Secondary active means it's not necessarily active in the sense of using ATP like pumps. But they usually like transport 2 or more species of ions at once, and usually they will transport in one direction or 2 different directions. And then they use the energy like from one species to pump the energy for the other species. But let's look at examples so that you know what I'm talking about. Here, let's talk about called NKCC. NKCC stands for sodium, potassium, chloride, co-transporter. What NKCC does is it imports 1 sodium ion, and it imports 1 potassium ion, and it imports 2 chloride ions. And so it is electroneutral. This is electroneutral because there is no net accumulation or change of electric charge due to the transport, because 1 sodium ion and 1 potassium ion, they are 1 charge, 1 positive charge each, and the chloride ion is 1 negatively charged, so you have to get 2. In contrast, the NK, the sodium potassium exchanger, it is not electroneutral because you remove 3 positively charged electrons. So 3 positively charged ions, and then you only put 2 positively charged ions. So you sort of lose 1 positively charged ions once. But NKC is electroneutral. Why do we call it secondary active? So you see that for the potassium, because of the electrochemical potential of sodium, it would like to move into the cell. So for sodium to move in, it doesn't require extra energy. It just flows along the electrochemical potential difference. So once sodium flows in, then it provides the energy to carry potassium and chloride in. So that's what we call the secondary active transporter. It sort of rely on the energy from the first species that moved in, and then for the others to move. So let's look at another type of transporters. Let's call it, no, not let's call it, it is called NHE. NHE stands for sodium hydrogen exchanger. So this is also a secondary transporter. It moves in one sodium. This doesn't require energy because sodium naturally would like to move into the cell due to its electrochemical gradient. And then it removes one hydrogen ion. So it is also electroneutral. And it uses the energy of potassium, sorry, use the energy of sodium to pump hydrogen. And you can see the name. So both of these are called transporters. They are secondary active transporter. For those transporter that moves all the ions at one same direction, like NKCC, they are called a co-transporter because they move all the ions into the cell. So for the transporter that moves ions in opposite direction, one in, one out, that we call exchanger. And those are like examples of ion transporters. So along with the ion channels, which are the passive transporter mechanism we discussed the last time, now this time we discussed ion pumps and then ion transports. So these three types of ion carriers, they are very common on the cell membrane, and each cell has different types of channels, pumps, and transporters, and they collectively maintain the homeostasis of the electrolytes inside of the cell. And it's not necessarily just electrolytes. A lot of ion transporters, they may co-transporter glucose. Some channels may allows one allow the transport of like sodium and glucose as a pair. And then and others can also happen. But mostly they are electrolytes. Okay, let's look at an exercise. If the intracellular ion is low due to the activity of NKE, explain how this gradient explain how this gradient can be by NHE. True. Hydrogen without using ATP. It still looks, I don't know. I'm just try to make it legible. Okay, so this is the exercise for this lab.